Eldridge was a town where the past seemed to bleed into the present. The cobblestone streets whispered secrets, and the grand Eldridge estate loomed over the town like a silent sentinel. For the locals, the estate was a source of unease. It was beautiful in its own way, but it carried the weight of a dark history. Detective Sarah Green, with her no-nonsense attitude and dry sense of humor, navigated the narrow streets with a sigh. She had seen her fair share of oddities in her career, but the recent deaths in Eldridge were something else. Gruesome, unexplainable, and worst of all, dismissed by her superiors. She arrived at the Eldridge Inn, a quaint place with creaky floors and musty curtains, to meet the new arrivals, the paranormal investigation team, PIT. Dr. Jonathan Blackwood, the team's leader, was already seated in the lobby. With his graying hair and piercing eyes, he exuded an air of authority mixed with a touch of eccentricity. Next to him was Emily Rivers, a tech expert who looked like she'd rather be coding in a dark room than dealing with ghosts, and Alex Hartman, a medium whose calm demeanor was at odds with his unsettling profession. "Welcome to Eldridge," Sarah said, shaking hands with each of them. "I hope you don't scare easily. The locals are pretty terrifying." Jonathan chuckled. "We've faced worse, though I hear your local cuisine can be quite the horror show." Emily smirked, setting up her equipment. "Just tell me there's Wi-Fi." "Barely," Sarah replied. "The ghosts probably have a better connection than we do." The team settled in, and soon they were discussing the string of deaths. Sarah briefed them on the victims, all found in or near the Eldridge estate, all showing signs of extreme fear before death. The local police had written them off as accidents or animal attacks, but Sarah knew better. "We're dealing with something off," Sarah said, trying to keep her frustration in check. "And my captain, he's more interested in his golf game than in solving these cases. Corruption in small-town police forces? Shocking," Emily said dryly, not looking up from her laptop. Alex raised an eyebrow. "I'm sensing sarcasm." "Wow, you really are a medium," Emily shot back with a grin. Jonathan interjected. "Let's focus. Tonight, we do a preliminary sweep of the estate. Sarah, you're with us. We could use your insight." As night fell, the team geared up. EMF detectors, thermal cameras, EVP recorders. They had enough gadgets to make a sci-fi movie jealous. Sarah eyed the equipment skeptically. "Do you really think this stuff works?" she asked. "It works better than shouting boo at shadows," Emily replied. They made their way to the Eldridge estate. The mansion was eerily quiet, the air thick with anticipation. Jonathan led the way, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. "Remember, stay together," he instructed. "And if you see anything unusual, don't panic." "Easier said than done," Sarah muttered, clutching her flashlight like a lifeline. Inside, the estate was a maze of decaying grandeur. Faded portraits of long-dead Eldridge family members lined the walls, their eyes seeming to follow the team as they moved. The air was damp, and the floorboards creaked ominously. Emily set up her equipment in the main hall, while Alex and Jonathan explored the adjoining rooms. Sarah stayed close, her instincts on high alert. Suddenly, the EMF detector spiked, and Emily's thermal camera picked up a cold spot near the grand staircase. "Looks like we have company," Emily said, her tone a mix of excitement and apprehension. A shadowy figure appeared at the top of the stairs, just visible in the dim light. Alex stepped forward, trying to make contact. "Who are you?" he called out. "Why are you here?" The shadow man didn't respond. Instead, it slowly descended the stairs, its form flickering like a faulty hologram. Sarah's heart pounded, but she forced herself to stay calm. "Great, a ghost with commitment issues," she quipped, trying to lighten the mood. The shadow man reached the bottom of the stairs and vanished, leaving the team in stunned silence. Jonathan checked his watch. "That's enough for tonight. Let's regroup and analyze the data," he said, ushering everyone out. Back at the inn, they reviewed the footage and readings. Emily's thermal camera had captured the shadow man's approach in chilling detail, and the EMF spikes confirmed a strong paranormal presence. "What do you think, Doc?" Sarah asked Jonathan, "Is this place haunted, or are we all just losing it?" "Both," Jonathan replied with a wry smile. "But seriously, there's something very wrong here. And it's just the beginning." Sarah nodded. "Well, if we're going to be ghost hunters, we might as well do it right. Just promise me one thing." "What's that?" "No more jokes about the local cuisine. It's bad enough without the commentary." Emily laughed. "Deal. But if I see one more ghost, I'm demanding hazard pay." As the team settled in for the night, the weight of the estate's dark secrets hung over them. The first step into the forbidden chambers had been taken, and there was no turning back. Morning in Eldridge was a study in contrasts. The sunlight tried to penetrate the persistent fog, casting the town in a ghostly glow. Sarah Green, sipping her coffee at the Eldridge Inn, wondered if the locals had gotten used to living in a perpetual horror movie set. Her thoughts were interrupted by the arrival of the paranormal investigation team, Pitt, looking surprisingly chipper considering last night's encounter. Dr. Jonathan Blackwood entered first, his expression a mix of determination and curiosity. Emily Rivers followed, balancing a tray of pastries with one hand and her laptop with the other. Alex Hartman, as usual, seemed eerily serene, as if he'd just finished a yoga session rather than a night of ghost hunting. "Good morning, team," Jonathan greeted. "Ready for another day of poking around in the dark?" "Always," Emily replied, setting down the tray. "And I brought pastries. Figured we might need the sugar rush." "Caffeine and sugar, the breakfast of ghost hunters," Sarah remarked dryly. "We should put that on a t-shirt." Alex smiled. "Could be a bestseller. Right next to 'I survived Eldridge Estate, and all I got was this lousy t-shirt." Jonathan cleared his throat, bringing the team's focus back. Last night's encounter confirmed strong paranormal activity in the estate. Today we go deeper. I want to find out what's causing this. "Deeper, huh? Sounds like we're auditioning for a horror movie sequel," Sarah said. "The Eldridge Estate, Ghosts Strike Back." Jonathan chuckled. "If it turns into a franchise, you can be the star." The team gathered their equipment and headed back to the estate. The morning fog hadn't lifted, making the mansion look even more foreboding. They approached the entrance, the creaking door giving them an appropriately eerie welcome. Inside, Emily set up her equipment in the main hall again, calibrating the EMF detectors and thermal cameras. "We got good readings last night. If we're lucky, our shadowy friend will make another appearance." "Lucky? That's one way to put it," Sarah muttered, checking her flashlight. "Personally, I prefer my mornings ghost-free." They descended into the basement, where the air was thick with must and decay. The walls were lined with shelves holding dusty relics, remnants of the estate's dark past. Jonathan led the way, his flashlight revealing a hidden door at the far end. "Emily, bring the thermal camera over here," Jonathan called. "I think we've found our entrance to the deeper chambers." As Emily set up, Alex placed his hand on the door, closing his eyes. "There's a strong presence here, something ancient and very angry." "Fantastic," Sarah said with mock enthusiasm. "Just what I wanted to hear. Let's open it up." The door creaked open, revealing a narrow staircase leading further down into the darkness. The team descended cautiously, their footsteps echoing off the stone walls. At the bottom, they found themselves in a network of tunnels, the air growing colder with each step. Jonathan paused, consulting his map. These tunnels aren't on any of the estate's blueprints. They must have been built in secret, because nothing bad ever happens in secret tunnels, Sarah quipped. They ventured deeper, the tunnels twisting and turning in a confusing labyrinth. Suddenly, the EMF detector spiked, and Emily's thermal camera picked up multiple cold spots ahead. "Looks like we've got company," Emily said, adjusting the camera settings. From the shadows emerged several figures, their forms shifting and indistinct. Crawlers. The creatures moved with a horrifying speed and agility, their limbs bending at unnatural angles. "Everyone stay close," Jonathan ordered. "And whatever you do, don't run." "Why? Because they'll chase us?" Sarah asked, her hand on her gun. No, because you'll make me look bad, Jonathan replied with a hint of a smile. The crawlers advanced, their movements jerky and unsettling. Alex stepped forward, attempting to communicate with them. We mean you no harm. Why are you here? The crawlers hissed, their voices a chorus of whispers. This is our domain. You are not welcome. Great territorial ghosts, Sarah muttered. What's next? A haunted HOA meeting? One of the crawlers lunged at Emily, who managed to dodge it just in time. Hey, no touching. I didn't sign up for this. Focus, everyone, Jonathan shouted, using his equipment to emit a high-frequency sound that seemed to repel the crawlers temporarily. We need to find the source of their power. They pressed on, the tunnels leading to a large chamber filled with ancient symbols and a massive stone altar. The temperature dropped sharply, and a sense of dread washed over them. This is it, Jonathan said. The heart of the estate's darkness. Sarah approached the altar, examining the symbols. These look like summoning runes. Someone tried to bring something here. Something big. Demons, Alex confirmed. This place was used for rituals. We need to be very careful. Suddenly, the chamber shook, and a deep, guttural growl echoed through the tunnels. The team spun around to see a massive, shadowy figure emerging from the darkness. That's our cue to leave, Sarah said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. They retreated, the demon hot on their heels. Reaching the staircase, they scrambled up, slamming the hidden door behind them. Back in the main hall, they caught their breath, the reality of their situation sinking in. We've got a demon on our hands, Jonathan said, and it's not going to let us leave easily. Terrific, Sarah replied. So what's the plan? Exorcism, holy water, or do we just run screaming into the night? Jonathan smiled grimly. All of the above, detective. All of the above. As they prepared for their next move, the weight of the task ahead loomed over them. They had delved into the darkness and found something far worse than they had imagined. But there was no turning back now. The forbidden chambers of Eldridge Estate had been opened, and it was up to them to seal them again, no matter the cost. The Eldridge Inn seemed less cozy and more like a fortress as the paranormal investigation team, PIT, regrouped in the lobby. The previous night's encounter had left everyone on edge, even the usually unflappable Alex. Sarah Green, the town's detective, felt a mix of frustration and determination. The situation had escalated quickly, and the presence of a demon in the estate was more than she had bargained for. Jonathan Blackwood, the team's leader, was pacing back and forth, muttering to himself while consulting his notes. Emily Rivers sat at the table, her fingers flying over her laptop keyboard, trying to find any useful information about the symbols and rituals they had encountered. Alex Hartman, the medium, was in a quiet corner, meditating to regain his focus. Sarah broke the silence. All right, so we have a demon. That's not something you deal with every day. Any bright ideas on how we send it back to wherever it came from? Jonathan stopped pacing. We need to find out more about the rituals performed at the estate. There has to be a way to reverse the summoning. Emily, anything useful yet? Emily looked up from her laptop. Well, I've found references to similar symbols in old grimoires, but nothing concrete. Most of the sources are vague or contradict each other. Classic occult stuff. So, in other words, we're winging it, Sarah said dryly. Fantastic. Alex opened his eyes and joined the discussion. We need to focus on the altar room. It's the epicenter of the activity. If we can disrupt the power source, we might be able to weaken the demon. Jonathan nodded. Agreed. But first, we need to gather more information. The local historical society might have records about the estate's past. We should start there. Sarah sighed. Great. Research and demons. My two favorite things. As they prepared to leave, Sarah's phone buzzed. It was Captain Davis from the local police force, and he didn't sound happy. Green, what the hell is going on? I've got people reporting strange noises and sightings near the estate. You're supposed to be investigating, not stirring up trouble. Sarah took a deep breath. Captain, we're dealing with something beyond the usual. I need your support on this. Just keep the locals away from the estate for now. You're on thin ice, Green. Make this mess go away, Davis barked before hanging up. Sarah shook her head. Charming as ever. Let's get to the Historical Society before I lose what little patience I have left. The Eldridge Historical Society was a dusty old building, filled with relics and records of the town's past. Mrs. Henderson, the elderly curator, greeted them with a skeptical look. Detective Green, and you must be the ghost hunters I've heard about. What brings you here? She asked, her voice dripping with doubt. We're looking for information on the Eldridge estate, Jonathan said, particularly anything about rituals or occult activities. Mrs. Henderson raised an eyebrow. Occult activities? In Eldridge? I suppose it's possible. Follow me. She led them to the archives, where she pulled out several old documents and books. The Eldridge family was known for their eccentricities. This might be what you're looking for. Emily quickly scanned the documents. Here, this mentions a secret society that the Eldridge family was involved with. They performed rituals to summon spirits, believing it would grant them power and wealth. And instead, they summoned a demon, Sarah muttered, because that's what happens when you mess with the occult. Jonathan's eyes lit up. This is exactly what we need. If we can find out more about these rituals, we might be able to reverse them. Mrs. Henderson looked at them over her glasses. Be careful, detective. Eldridge Estate has a dark history. Many have tried to uncover its secrets, and few have succeeded. Don't worry, Mrs. Henderson. We're professionals, Jonathan said, trying to sound confident. Professionals at getting into trouble, Sarah added under her breath. Armed with new information, the team returned to the estate. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the grounds. The mansion loomed ahead, its windows like dark, empty eyes watching their approach. Ready for round 2? Jonathan asked, checking his equipment. As ready as I'll ever be, Sarah replied. Just remember, if things go south, I'm running and not looking back. Emily laughed nervously. Deal. But let's try to avoid that. They made their way back to the altar room. The air was thick with tension, and the sense of foreboding was palpable. Jonathan placed the documents on the altar and began to decipher the ritual instructions. We need to create a protective circle, he said. Emily, help me with the symbols. Alex, prepare the candles. As they worked, Sarah kept watch, her flashlight scanning the shadows. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Anyone else getting the heebie-jeebies? She asked, trying to keep her tone light. Constantly, Emily replied, focused on drawing the symbols. Alex set up the candles, his movements calm and deliberate. We're almost ready. Once we start, there's no turning back. Jonathan lit the candles and began chanting the incantation. The air grew colder, and the shadows seemed to close in around them. The ground shook, and a low growl echoed through the chamber. Here we go, Sarah muttered, bracing herself. The shadows coalesced into the form of the demon, its eyes glowing with malevolent intent. It roared, shaking the walls and extinguishing the candles. Hold the circle, Jonathan shouted. Don't let it break. The team stood their ground, their combined strength holding the protective barrier in place. The demon clawed at the circle, but it couldn't penetrate the shield. Sarah, her heart pounding, looked at the demon and then at her team. I can't believe I'm saying this, but we might just pull this off. Jonathan's chanting grew louder, and the symbols on the ground began to glow. The demon howled in fury as it was drawn back towards the altar. Almost there, Emily shouted, her voice strained. With a final burst of energy, the demon was sucked into the altar, the chamber falling silent. The protective circle faded, and the team collapsed, exhausted but victorious. Jonathan looked up, a triumphant smile on his face. We did it. The demon is contained. Sarah let out a relieved laugh. Well, that was fun. Let's never do it again. Emily grinned. Agreed, but at least we have a great story to tell. As they made their way back to the inn, the weight of their experience hung over them. They had confronted the abyss and emerged victorious, but the scars of their encounter would remain. The forbidden chambers had been sealed, but the memories would linger, a reminder of the darkness they had faced and the courage it took to stand against it. The morning sun filtered through the thick curtains of the Eldridge Inn, casting a golden hue on the worn furniture. The paranormal investigation team, PIT, gathered around a large wooden table in the dining area, nursing cups of coffee. They had survived the night, but the battle was far from over. Jonathan Blackwood, the team's leader, spread out the documents they had retrieved from the Historical Society. "All right, team, we've managed to contain the demon, but we need to find a permanent solution to banish it for good. These documents mention a cleansing ritual, but it's incomplete. We need to find the missing pieces." Sarah Green, the town's detective, took a sip of her coffee and grimaced. "Great, another wild goose chase. I'm starting to think the Eldridge family just liked making things difficult for the sake of it." Emily Rivers, the team's tech expert, chuckled. "Well, they were eccentric millionaires. Making things difficult probably came with the territory." Alex Hartman, the medium, rubbed his temples. "We need to be careful. The demon might be contained, but it's still very much present. Any misstep could release it again." Jonathan nodded. "Agreed. Let's start by investigating the other locations mentioned in the documents. The estate grounds are vast, and we've only scratched the surface." As they prepared to leave, a knock on the door interrupted them. Sarah opened it to find Captain Davis standing there, looking both annoyed and concerned. "Green, we need to talk. Reports of strange activity around the estate are increasing. People are scared, and I'm getting pressure from above to shut this down." Sarah sighed. "Captain, we're doing everything we can. We've contained the immediate threat, but we need more time to banish it permanently. We're following leads on a cleansing ritual." Davis frowned. "Just make sure this doesn't blow up in our faces. The last thing we need is a panic in this town. And keep me updated." As Davis left, Jonathan turned to Sarah. "He's right. We need to move quickly and discreetly. Emily, start scanning the documents for any clues about the other locations. Alex and I will check out the grounds." Sarah grabbed her coat. "I'll head to the local library. Maybe there's something in the town records that could help." They split up, each heading to their respective tasks. Jonathan and Alex made their way to the estate's expansive gardens. Overgrown and tangled, the gardens had an eerie, forgotten beauty to them. As they walked, Alex couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. "Lovely place, isn't it?" Alex remarked, his voice tinged with sarcasm. "Perfect for a demonic entity to make its home." Jonathan smirked. "Yes, the Eldridges certainly had a knack for picking prime real estate. Let's focus on finding any hidden structures or markers mentioned in the documents." After hours of searching, they stumbled upon a hidden entrance partially covered by vines. A stone staircase descended into darkness. "Why do rich people always have secret staircases?" Alex muttered. "It's like they can't resist a good cliché." Jonathan chuckled. "Wouldn't be a proper haunted estate without one. Let's see where this leads." Descending the staircase, they found themselves in a crypt-like chamber, filled with ancient artifacts and cryptic symbols carved into the walls. The air was thick with an oppressive energy. "Looks like we found the Eldridge family's secret lair," Alex said, his dry humor a thin veil over his unease. "Maybe they held their book club meetings down here." Jonathan ignored the comment and examined the symbols closely. "These match the ones we found in the altar room. This place was definitely used for their rituals. We need to document everything." Meanwhile, Sarah was at the local library, combing through dusty town records with the help of Mrs. Henderson, the elderly librarian. "Detective Green, it's a pleasure to see someone taking an interest in our town's history," Mrs. Henderson said with a warm smile. "What exactly are you looking for?" "Anything related to the Eldridge family and their estate, particularly any references to rituals or unusual events," Sarah replied. Mrs. Henderson's eyes twinkled with curiosity. The Eldridge family was always shrouded in mystery. There are tales of secret societies and strange happenings. Let's see what we can find. Hours passed as they sifted through old records and newspapers. Finally, Sarah found a mention of a fire at the estate in the late 1800s, rumored to have been caused by a failed ritual. "This might be it," Sarah said, pointing to the article. "A fire during a ritual. Could explain the missing parts of the documents." Mrs. Henderson nodded. Many records were lost in that fire. If there are missing pieces, they might be buried somewhere on the estate. Back at the inn, Emily was making progress with the documents. She had pieced together most of the cleansing ritual, but was still missing crucial steps. When Jonathan and Alex returned, they shared their findings from the crypt. Emily's eyes lit up. "This is perfect. The symbols you found match the ones we need for the ritual. We're getting closer." As night fell, the team reconvened to plan their next move. They now had a clearer picture of the Eldridge family's activities and the ritual needed to banish the demon. "We need to perform the cleansing ritual in the crypt," Jonathan said. "It's the source of the estate's power. If we can break the connection there, we can banish the demon." Sarah looked at the team, a mix of determination and weariness in her eyes. "Let's do it. But if I get possessed or something, I'm holding all of you responsible." Alex grinned. "Noted. And if we survive this, drinks are on me." As they prepared their equipment, the gravity of the situation settled over them. They were about to face the darkest part of the estate, where the line between the living and the dead blurred. With a mix of dry humor and steely resolve, they headed back to the crypt, ready to confront the darkness once more. The team stood at the entrance to the crypt, the oppressive energy almost palpable. Armed with their equipment and a semblance of a plan, they took a collective breath and descended into the darkness once more. "This is it, folks," Jonathan said, trying to sound confident. "We banished the demon, we saved the day. No pressure." Sarah rolled her eyes. "Yeah, just another typical Thursday night. Can't wait to file this report." Emily, lugging the heavy EMF reader, chuckled. "Just think of the overtime pay, detective. Assuming we don't all end up as ghost fodder." They reached the bottom of the staircase, the crypt looming around them like a tomb from some ancient nightmare. The symbols on the walls seemed to pulse with a faint, sinister light. Alex set up the equipment, placing candles in a circle around the central altar. "Remember, once we start, there's no turning back. If anyone feels the sudden urge to run screaming, now's the time." "No promises," Sarah muttered, taking her place in the circle. Jonathan held up the ancient tome they had pieced together, its pages fragile and yellowed. "Emily, keep an eye on the readings. Sarah, Alex, and I will handle the incantations. Let's get this done." As they began the ritual, the air grew colder, and an unnatural wind swirled around them. The candles flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Jonathan's voice echoed through the chamber as he chanted the ancient words, his tone steady but tense. Emily's eyes were glued to the EMF reader. Guys, we're getting some serious spikes here. Whatever we're doing, it's working, or we're really pissing it off." "Let's hope for the former," Alex replied, his voice laced with dry humor, "because the latter sounds way less fun." Suddenly, a deep, guttural growl resonated through the crypt, making the ground beneath them tremble. The shadows on the walls began to move, coalescing into a dark, amorphous form. "Here we go," Jonathan said, his voice strained. "Keep the circle intact. We can't let it break through." The dark form lashed out, tendrils of shadow striking against an invisible barrier around the team. Sarah tightened her grip on her flashlight, using it as a makeshift weapon to fend off the shadows. "I swear, if we get out of this alive, I'm demanding a raise," Sarah grumbled, her flashlight cutting through the darkness. Alex smirked. "I'll second that. Maybe we can start a union. Paranormal investigators, Local 666. The entity roared, its fury shaking the crypt. Jonathan continued the incantations, his voice unwavering despite the chaos around him. The symbols on the walls glowed brighter, their light forming a protective barrier. Emily's fingers flew over her tablet, adjusting settings on the fly. The readings are off the charts. We're close, just keep it up. With one final, earth-shaking roar, the demon surged against the barrier, but the light from the symbols intensified, driving it back. The shadows writhed and twisted before finally dissipating into the air, leaving only an eerie silence. Jonathan's voice wavered as he spoke the last words of the incantation. Spiritus obscurum exorcisere. A blinding flash of light filled the crypt, and the oppressive energy lifted. The team stood in stunned silence, the reality of their victory slowly sinking in. "We did it," Alex said, his voice a mix of disbelief and relief. "We actually did it." Sarah let out a shaky laugh. "Well, I'll be damned. Drinks are on you, remember?" Jonathan smiled, exhaustion evident on his face. "Absolutely. And Sarah, I'll personally make sure you get that raise." Emily checked the EMF reader, now showing normal levels. "Looks like the coast is clear. The demon's gone." As they packed up their equipment and ascended the staircase, the tension slowly eased, replaced by a sense of camaraderie and triumph. Back at the inn, they collapsed into chairs, too tired to even think about the paperwork ahead of them. Captain Davis entered, looking both relieved and impressed. "You did it," he said simply. "The reports have stopped. Whatever you did, it worked." Sarah gave a tired smile. "Just another day at the office, Captain. Now about that raise." Davis chuckled. "We'll talk. In the meantime, get some rest. You've earned it." As the team settled into the cozy warmth of the inn, the reality of their victory began to sink in. They had faced down a demonic entity and lived to tell the tale. The Eldridge estate was finally at peace, and so were its restless spirits. Emily raised her glass in a toast. To the pit, and to not becoming ghost fodder. "Hear, hear," Jonathan agreed. "And to surviving one hell of a night." Alex leaned back, a satisfied smile on his face. "And to the paranormal investigators, Local 666. We make one hell of a team." As laughter filled the room, the team knew they had faced the darkness and emerged stronger for it. The Eldridge estate might hold many secrets, but none would ever be as terrifying as what they had conquered together.